Quite a while ago, I was requested to make a part 2 of my UFO tier list video. Part 1 contains some really common, well-known UFO cases. In this part, I have some obscure cases that you've probably not heard of before. Let me know in the comments if you have heard of some of these and where you would rank them on the list. Without further ado, let's rank some obscure UFO cases to how believable I think they are. Okay, so first up on our list here, we have a bunch of videos that I found on Reddit that come from Belgrade in Serbia. The videos were taken in 2020. You can see some of them here. The videos start from about 8 p.m. and as you can see, it's kind of like a red, orange glowing light with like a sun effect on it, as some have described. It's really bright. It was captured from multiple different angles and it was actually covered on Serbian TV as well. And they had a astronomer expert on who couldn't really explain what was going on here. He wrote off weather balloons and fireballs and that sort of thing. Some people have said perhaps it's a flare. Now, I've never seen a flare act like this. But from one of the particular videos, I just love how enthusiastic the kid capturing it is.
What the f? Oh my god! What the f? Tata!
Oh.
Tata!
It makes me think like, okay, this isn't a hoax. That's like a very natural, excitable reaction. But overall, it's hard to place this one. There is no military confirmation or a radar captured of this or anything like that. So we don't have that to go off, which in some of these later, obviously we do. We literally just have these videos from Belgrade. I'm going to set the benchmark here as being a B. I think that's a good place to start. The footage, especially of the kid that's excited, it's very compelling that how excited he is. Clearly what he's seeing is like strange, but it also could be a weird space event, a weird weather event, or perhaps a weird acting flare. I don't know. I would like to see, to get up to A and S tier, for me, it has to be a clear source or object. You know, it's not really clear what this is, but it's semi-compelling. That's why it's B tier for me. Okay, so next we have this Renaissance painting. I believe it's called the Madonna with St. John, a 15th century Renaissance painting from Italy. So the painting's actually called the Madonna and Child with infant St. John, and it depicts the Virgin Mary holding a little baby Jesus here. But that is not what we're looking at. We're looking in the background of this picture. You can see in the top right, there's a weird disc-like object that kind of looks like a UFO. It's tilted in the sky. It's got like a dome or some kind of turret on top, and it emits like a beam of light, it looks like. Now, this was painted in the 15th century, so you could look at this and you could say, oh, this guy was painting this picture. Maybe out the window, he saw a UFO fly past and thought, do you know what? I'm going to paint that into the picture. But back then, even if they did see objects like this, they would have thought very differently about them than we do today. They would have thought about it from a very religious angle. They would have thought angels, godlike being, the Holy Spirit, perhaps. That's how they would have seen these objects. However, having said that, the picture does look like a modern day UFO as we think of them, which like makes me think, oh, perhaps the people that did see angels back then, what they were actually seeing was UFOs. Like, it's a really weird thing to paint in the 1500s. I feel like, where would he have got this image from? So to avoid, I'm actually going to have to go B tier again, because it's not clear-cut evidence, it's not direct evidence, but why in the 15th century was someone seeing something that looked like this? I think it's kind of interesting, even though it would have been interpreted in a different way back then. I think the B tier would be the suitable spot. Okay, our next piece of evidence is the Ilkley Moor alien encounter in Yorkshire, England. So on a misty morning in Ilkley, England, an area of Yorkshire that is known for spirituality and rock carvings in particular, a police officer, former police officer, Philip Spencer, was taking a walk to go and visit his father-in-law. He set out with his camera, partly motivated by reports of strange lights in the area. Now, as he walked along a path, he noticed in the distance a figure standing about 4 feet tall. It was quite misty and foggy, so he couldn't be clear, but he snapped a picture regardless. And this is the picture that we see he gets. It's something unnatural. It's got a large head, thin arms. It looks like a typical alien as we would depict them today. And he said it appeared to wave at him before he tried to snap another picture, and then it ran away, disappearing into the mist. Moments later, he reported seeing a domed saucer take off from the distance and beam up into the sky. Unfortunately, this happened all so quick in front of him, he didn't manage to snap a picture of the saucer. After the experience, Philip Spencer noticed that about 2 hours had passed and he was in a completely different location as to where he originally snapped the first photo of the creature. He was carrying a compass, and when he looked down, it was spinning around and was completely malfunctioning. It wasn't until years later where UFOologists put him under hypnotic regression, and he recounted being taken aboard an aircraft where he was warned of a burning Earth and that we should really take care of the environment. Now, obviously, the photograph that Spencer got is really low quality, but with modern day technology, people have tried to touch it up, and this is the result of a touched up version of the photo. So you can see it's definitely a weird looking creature, but also not out the question of it being a costume. I really am trying to be skeptical here. Now, again, so tricky where to put this because it was one man alone with this grainy picture that he managed to capture. He was a police officer, though. He was credible, and he never really credited off the story after the fact. I'm going to have to put this in C tier, I think. I can't go B all the time. I can't just be in the middle ground. And I'm putting it in C tier because he was on his own. And he did go out with a camera with the aim of capturing some lights. He was clearly into UFO phenomena, and the fact that he was searching for it made me think that he easily could have gone out and set something like this up. With the foggy conditions in the morning as well, they're kind of great conditions to set up a fake. It makes it more believable and harder to tell that it's fake, perhaps. So yeah, I think C tier is fair. Next up is the Minot B-52 incident, where we have this radar image here that was captured. Now, this phenomenon occurred on October the 24th, 1968 at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. It's important to note that this Air Force base housed the B-52 bombers along with some nuclear missile silos. So it was a very secure nuclear facility during the Cold War. This case stands out for multiple eyewitnesses, radar detections, ground observations from high-profile officials being such a secure military base, and it's all on file. The report started at 3 a.m. in the early hours, where ground teams reported seeing orange lights hovering above the missile silos. The ground teams notified Minot's radio control room, where they managed to get in touch with some B-52 bombers that were coming back from a training mission to go check it out on their way back. Now, the B-52s on their way back from this training exercise, they had to decourse slightly to go closer to the missile silos rather than just coming into land. And as they did this, they noticed something lock on to their radar and start tracking them. Now, as the bombers started to descend down towards the silos so they could get a better look, that object approached to just 1 mile away from them, and this was all caught on radar. Now, these objects would tail the aircraft for around 20 miles, and reports from some pilots on board said that the objects appeared to spiral and maneuver behind the aircraft, and then they would just vanish from the radar. The B-52 teams also reported when the aircraft got close, within a mile, all their radio systems became gargled and completely unclear. We know about this from the declassified Project Blue Book now, and there's actually so many files on this. There's hundreds of pages of interviews with pilots. There's some radar photographs, which you can see now, and there's obviously the flight logs and the flight telemetry information there as well. Now, I think I like this one. This is regarded as, in the UFO world, as like really great piece of evidence. I think any evidence that's been released by the government and that the government have hundreds of pages on, you kind of have to think, okay, yeah, this is good evidence. Also, the fact that there's lots of like high credible personnel, there's lots of people that they wouldn't lie about this. All the pilots and the B-52s coming back from a long training exercise, they're not going to make something like this up. I'm actually going to put this in A tier. The only reason I don't bump it up more is because the radar pictures are just a picture of the light. This is from the 70s. It's a shame that they didn't get a real photo of it. And it's kind of hard to believe that they didn't get a real photo of it. Or if they do have real photos of it, perhaps they are not declassified. They are still classified because they're good photos. But I'm still going to stick with A tier because for me, it's not clear cut. To be S tier, you got to be really good evidence, you know. And this is radar photo, which I don't understand. I'm not a pilot, but yeah, the creditable personnel bumps it up for an A for me. Okay, yes. So next we have the Trumbull County UFO incident, which is a strange one because we basically have loads of 911 calls to hear, and that is the evidence. So December the 14th, 1994, in Trumbull County, Ohio, we have multiple very credible witnesses, a lot of police dispatchers and policemen themselves, police officers calling in reports of lights above them. Around midnight, the Trumbull County 911 dispatcher, Roy Ann Rudolph, was working that night, and she received a flood of calls reporting large objects flying in the sky.
County Dispatch, may I help you?
Yeah, did you get any reports of any objects in the air about 15 minutes ago?
You know, somebody called in, but I really don't know what that would be.
The reports feature a huge object. Some said it was flying as low as 50 feet, and it was completely silent, glowing, metallic, with lights that definitely didn't match any aircraft. This prompted many police officers in the area to be dispatched, and they actually started to follow the craft and chase the craft. And you can hear them speaking. They sound very serious. They're really not messing around. It's actually quite compelling to listen to.
Back to the UFO, I saw it.
Did you really?
But if it was red, I don't know. People saying it's blue. I pull up to this.
County just saw it too.
Down, he goes, hey, this thing's hovering right over Sodom Hutchins. It just came over my house, right? I said, are you serious? He goes, yeah, right? Then you tell me you got a report of it on Fifth Avenue Extension, right?
Yeah.
I'm right by Patty Metzinger's house, and I looked towards Fifth Avenue Extension. You could see a red glow up in the sky. It was huge.
We have on record at least 14 law enforcement officers reported seeing the craft, and they eventually basically chased it out of town. They chased it to the point where it left town, and it, like all these incidences, it flies off at speeds of hundreds, thousands miles an hour into the distance within a flash. Now, we don't have any photos to go by, which makes me skeptical about this. That's where my skepticism starts. It's 94. People definitely had, people had cameras. Yeah, fine, it would have been film, but a lot of people had cameras. I think maybe most households had a camera. No one, all the people that saw it, no one decided to grab a photo. But again, so many people did see it. And again, credible witnesses, which if you listen to the reports and them talking in the police cars, the cop cars, they sound very serious. But that's all it is. It's audio recordings. I can't see it for myself. They could have been seeing anything. It could have been a military test flight that they thought was weird, something like that. So I have to put this, it's maybe between C and D. It might be a D+. I'm going to put it in C just because it's got the multiple witnesses and they're credible witnesses. And if you listen to the recordings, it is quite compelling. So C. Next up, we have the 1996 Tehran UFO incident, very topical. So on September the 18th, 1976, we had multiple civilian reports in Tehran, in Iran, basically citing a craft. One of those reports came from a Hossein Pruzi, who was an air traffic controller. He reported this, and of course the military got involved, and they actually scrambled jets to go and check out what this craft was. Witnesses described it as a pulsating helicopter type object, but as the air traffic controller knew, there was no helicopters in the sky in Tehran at the time. Lieutenant Yadi Nazari was the first Phantom fighter jet pilot to be deployed, and he would go and find the object and tail it. He visually acquired the target, and he described it as being brighter than a star and about the size of a passenger jet. He managed to lock on his radar about 40 miles out and head towards the object. And as he got closer, all his instruments began to fail. His radar, his communications, his navigation systems, they all failed. And in a panic, he decided to tail off and stop pursuing the craft. And by doing this, all his systems came straight back online. Now, a second F4 Phantom fighter jet was scrambled, and that also began to pursue the craft. As the second pilot approached, he said the craft seemed to emit multicolored lights, and in a panic, he decided to engage his missile systems. As he attempted to aim and fire, his control panel completely shut down. The second pilot then claimed the jet flew towards him and released some kind of shrapnel behind it, or flares. It didn't damage the jet at all, but it spooked the pilot, and he also decided to disengage. And as he did so, all his systems came back online. We know about this also from declassified reports. Iran also seemed to think this was serious enough, as they immediately reported it to the American government. Both pilots have spoke about this publicly throughout their whole lives, and their story has never deviated or changed. It stays pretty consistent. Therefore, we have more credible sources, but not much info on this one. I think maybe I have to put it in the C category, because as far as evidence goes, it's just someone's word, and I guess it's a high profile person's word. The fact that there were reports from civilians on the ground, and then the two fighter pilots followed up and confirmed they saw some kind of craft, which they actually interacted with. I'm actually going to put it in B. The fact they reported it to the American government, they had documentation on it, they deemed it to be serious. I'm going to give it C. C. Purely because I don't have anything visual. Maybe that's harsh. So next, I believe we have an event called Tully's Saucer Nest, which is a nest for a flying saucer. It literally is. So this is our first case from Australia, from January 19th, 1966, in a small town called Tully. George Pedley, a 27-year-old banana farmer, was driving his tractor when he heard a spitting engine sound that he assumed was problems with his tractor. So he turned it off to get out and have a look, and he found no problems and could still hear the sound. That's when he looked up and saw a greyish saucer-like object about 25 feet wide flying above him. It hovered at about tree level and then drifted off into a 45-degree angle and flew up into the sky at great speeds before disappearing in a blue vapor. He said the entire experience only lasted about 4 seconds. I do something else that lasts that long. Pedley went on to investigate the area where he thought the craft came from, and in the lagoon there was tall marsh-like grass, but there was a small area about 30 feet wide that had been flattened. The plants had been laid down and were laying down on their side counterclockwise, rotating round in a circle. There was no signs of burnage or breakage, just neatly laid down reeds. Here are some photos from the time of a farmer sitting in the nest, just so you can see the size and the structure. Following this report in the area, there was about 5 or 6 more reports of exactly the same thing during the late 60s. This is really common for UFO cases, obviously. One report leads to a dozen more, perhaps copycats. And the Royal Air Force of Australia actually looked into this, and they put it down to natural phenomena. They cited natural submersion, maybe a whirlwind or a water spout. But some UFO critics have said there's no way that a whirlwind or water spout could create that effect. I'm going to make this one simple and put it in the D category. I think, like, just like, this is a crop circle, right? Kind of. I think just like crop circles, a lot of them are hoaxes. That's not to say I think all crop circle incidences are hoaxes, but yeah, it's a typical story, isn't it? I saw a UFO, or where's the proof? Oh, look, here's a load of flattened grass that someone could have easily done themselves, and they claim that's where the UFO came from. And it's funny that they had like 5 or 6 in the same area afterwards. It's not to say if it was real that there could have been 5 or 6 more landing sites in the same area. Could be. But for me, this is no evidence. This is D for me. And next up, we have the Gulf Breeze UFO sightings, a bunch of sightings coming from Florida. Gulf Breeze is a small coastal town in Florida where through 1987 and 88, there was a string of UFO sightings. This case comes from a huge volume of reports from the area and a striking photograph that started it all. On November the 11th, 1987, a local builder, Ed Walters, sometimes known as Mr. X, claimed that he photographed this disc-like UFO hovering near his home. He said a bright disc object in his backyard emitted a blue beam and then briefly immobilized him and transferred telepathic images or sensations before departing off into the distance. Walters did manage to take several Polaroid photos of the flying saucer before it did fly off into the distance and telepathically immobilize him. The pictures that he took were published in the Gulf Breeze Sentinel local newspaper, which then flooded in with loads and loads more cases of people saying they had seen exactly the same thing. 88 saw more photos, more reports, and even one with a small alien figure in the window. He also co-authored a book in the 1990s all about the incidents, citing all his images in the book also. If someone from another world was to build this, it's kind of clunky. It's got uneven window spacing. It's kind of a bit wonky looking, but nonetheless, he went forward and obviously managed to capture more photos of the craft. Now, in 1990, Walters moved home. This is hilarious. You're going to love this. And the new homeowners discovered some strange objects in the attic. Constructed from foam pie plates and cardboard boxes, they found structures of UFOs. Yeah, homemade UFO models were he left them in the loft. I don't think there's anywhere else for this to go. We can whack this straight in D minus. This is an F. This is a fail. He literally got caught. But yeah, this one is obviously not real to me, but it's in there for jokes and just to remind us that people obviously do fake these things for like definite. Maybe all of these are fakes, but this one, there's no doubt. Next up, we have the Delphos Ring incident. 16-year-old Ronald Johnson was outside at 7 p.m. doing his evening chores, feeding the sheep on his dad's farm, when he noticed a dome mushroom-shaped craft with a metallic rounded top, glowing, pulsing, and emitting multicolored light, floating just above the dirt in his garden. He described the multicolored light as being so bright that they temporarily blinded him. As he would approach the craft, because that's obviously what you would do if you were being blinded by a strange-looking craft, it rapidly rose and flew off into the distance. Ronnie ran inside to tell his parents, but of course by the time his parents arrived, it had already departed. But they did note, both his parents, Durrell and Irma Johnson, they did see a light fading off into the distance. The family immediately investigated the spot where the craft left, and they noticed a striking circular ring from where the craft was floating above. The ring was about 8 foot in diameter, and it was completely dry and like crusted over with a grayish-like substance, and even a slight glow. A fluorescent, glowy, eerie light was described to be coming from the grayish substance. Irma Johnson decided to touch it, and her finger immediately went numb, and as she wiped her finger on her leg then also went numb. The Johnson family then took this photo of the ring after, capturing it in the evening. So it's kind of hard to see what it is, but yes, this is where a UFO was just hovering above. The local sheriff, Ralph Enlow, inspected the site and he did describe it as a big donut of dry soil in a muddy field. Soil samples were taken from the ring and they did find strange substances. A bacterial-like fungus which can be stimulated from high energy was found within the ring. And also when they poured water over the ring, it didn't absorb into the soil, it just simply washed away onto the soil around it. The family reported ongoing effects to their health. Ronnie, the boy who saw the UFO, reported he had eye difficulties his whole life, partial blindness, and eventually he claimed that he had emerging psychic abilities. Now, weird one, what even is this? It's a circle on the ground, and it sounds like the whole family just want to cash in on this. Getting psychic abilities from it as well, that draws the line for me. That solidifies it in the D tier. I've been very negative on the last few. We need a good one. We need an A or an S tier. Hopefully we've got one coming. Next we have the Canary Islands UFO Incident. In 1976, off the northwest coast of Africa on the Canary Islands, we have thousands of people who say they saw a strange light in the sky. Around 9:30 local time, we had reports coming in of a yellow reddish light floating in the sky above Fuerteventura. It was described as a luminous object that appeared to rise from the horizon, change colours and remain stationary for some time before moving again. We then had similar reports from the island of Gran Canaria and all the other Canary Islands a few minutes later. The object was said to be visible for around 40 minutes by many accounts, and sometimes it would slowly move or accelerate away, but there was never any sound reported by most of the witnesses. Now, some more striking claims were made by some people in Gran Canaria. They reported that a large spherical and crystalline craft descended and hovered low, and they could see two tall humanoid figures inside, dressed in red suits with helmets. They were said to be moving around in the craft with precise mechanical-like movements. They were observed by a few people on reports, one of which being a doctor, which, again, if you have a good job, you're just seen as being credible. I suppose that does hold some weight, but I guess doctors make things up too. After seeing these people moving around inside the craft, they were just observed departing at a high speed. Now, this part of it was only seen by a very small number of people in the town of Maspalomas in Gran Canaria, but thousands of people reported the orangey red light floating above the skies for around 40 minutes. The Spanish Air Force investigated and they couldn't find anything. In over 100 pages of documents, they singled out 14 key witnesses that were, again, high-profile people, pilots, engineers, and astronomers, and that sort of thing. And they said that this definitely wasn't an aircraft. It was not a meteor. It was not an aurora. It was not a weather balloon or a missile. They ruled all those things out. And they actually ended the 100-page report as it being an unidentified aerial phenomenon. So here, the Spanish military don't know what it is, and they are claiming, we don't know what it is. We're just going to put it down as unidentified aerial phenomena. These documents were declassified in June 94. We have access to them now. Some of them were leaked in the late 70s, but yeah, this is I think quite good evidence. Some skeptics say that there was perhaps a secret nuclear missile test being done by submarines off the coast of Africa, and that's why they had to put it down as unidentified aerial phenomena, because the tests were a secret. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Skeptics are always looking for something. But I like this. I actually like this. I'm going to be optimistic about this one again. And I'm going to go B. And the reason I'm going to go B, we had thousands of people reporting it, which is great. There's no pictures. This picture here is a artist rendition of it. This isn't a real picture. No one got any pictures. Thousands of people saw it. It's 77, I think it was. So some people would have had cameras. Surely someone would have snapped a picture of it. It was in the sky for 40 minutes. Granted, cameras weren't very good back then. It would have been hard to snap a picture, but I'm going B tier because we have no picture. Picture would have bumped it up. Okay, next up we have the Magenta UFO Crash. This was one of my favorites when I was doing the research. The Magenta crash dates back to 1933 Italy. It's also sometimes known as the Mussolini UFO incident. It refers to a pre-World War II UFO crash revival event in Magenta, a small town in the northern regions of Italy. It's often regarded as the first UFO retrieval incident that we have like some records of. In the early hours of the morning, we have witnesses reporting a bell-shaped craft 30 to 50 meters wide. Some described it was like two discs that were joined together. Some more dramatic accounts alleged that there were two humanoid occupants about 1.8 meters tall with blonde hair and blue eyes and pale skin. The object allegedly left a crater in a field near Magenta. Benito Mussolini's fascist military police quickly came and sealed off the scene, censoring anything to the public. The craft and its remains were transported to a nearby aviation hangar near Milan for studying and reverse engineering. We know about this from the so-called alleged fascist UFO files, including telegrams and memos from the era that supposedly dictate Mussolini's office, going through the motions to go and detect this craft and bring it back to the facility. It's important to note that these are leaked documents that have never actually been confirmed by the Italian government. They're not from historical archives or state records officially. They're supposedly leaked from those sources. There's also a fun rumor with this one that it was sent to the Vatican, and the Vatican now look after this UFO, which in their enclave of stuff, I love that idea. I'm gonna put this in C. I think only because I like the story so much. It's really not giving us much evidence. The Italian government haven't confirmed that these documents are real. I think I have to put it in D, right? Because there's really nothing there. These documents could just be fake. It could just be a made-up fake story with some fake documents to go along with it. But either way, it's a cool story, and it's a cool idea that the Vatican might have a UFO. Next up, we have these Korean writings from a random Reddit user that I found quite compelling. Now on the UFO subreddit, this user here, leftad7088, posts, "I'm Korean and I think my ancestors may have witnessed a UFO." He goes on to explain here in the post that during this period, they recorded absolutely everything in Korea. And his family wrote here, in Gangneung, an object resembling a gourd bottle appeared in the sky with a pointed top and a large bottom. It seemed to fall towards the ground as if about to crash. It was red in color and it had passed a white aura, emerged in its trail. After the object disappeared, a thunderous sound was heard. In Yangyang at Kim Mwon Wee's house, something round the shiny like a wash basin suddenly appeared. It seemed to descend to the ground, but then rose back into the sky. And this was supposedly recorded in 1609. So super interesting. Now, the reason I like this one is because it's just from some like random Reddit user that's found this from his parents. So I'm going to give it C instead of D. I can't read Korean. I can't verify what it says. Makes me think maybe it's D worthy, but I'm going to believe that that's what it says. Someone on Reddit would have fact checked in the comments, surely. And yeah, something weird to see in the 1600s, 1609, I think it was, that's for sure. So let's put that in C. Next up, we have another incident from a US airbase, Falconbridge, I believe. Yes, from 1975, the Falconbridge UFO incident here. It's actually a Canadian airbase. So this report starts at around 3 a.m., actually reported by civilians staying in a little village about 15 minutes away from the Air Force Base. They would call the police, reporting low-flying bright lights that suddenly shot upwards into the sky. The Ontario Police then responded by saying they saw the exact same thing. Multiple police officers reported cylindrical-shaped and bright lights in the sky. At Falconbridge themselves, around 7 a.m., Major Robert Oliver and 3 other commanding officers reported seeing a 100-foot diameter sphere, and when you looked at it through binoculars, you could see obvious crater marks. The base then decided to track them on the radar, and they tracked the objects doing extreme maneuvers, rapidly going from 26,000 feet to 45,000 feet, and then darting to 72,000 feet, which is way above the typical ceilings of most aircrafts at the time. The US Air Force scrambled 2 fighter jets to the location to see what was going on, and unfortunately these jets didn't find anything. People on base said they took photos and had some quite compelling photos from on site on the base, but none of these photos are available publicly. It makes me wonder if perhaps the government have access to them and they are some maybe good photographs, good evidence that we're not ready to see. I think I'm going to go ahead and put this one. I don't know why I'm drawn to putting this one in B. But I'm going to have to follow the rest of my criteria. I have to be straight with my marking here. C, because again, we don't have evidence. We don't have the photos. It's all well and good someone saying, oh, they took a really good photo, but we can't see it. The government have it. I can't see the photo. So I'm going to have to put C once again. Okay, our next piece of evidence comes from a British police constable. I believe it's the Todmorden case. So it's actually the Todmorden UFO Encounter from 1980. PC Alan Godfrey was on a night shift as a West Yorkshire police officer when, at the time, around 5 a.m, he was responding to a call on a local housing estate. He was driving on the road, heading to Todmorden, when Godfrey spotted what initially he thought was a bus that had skidded sideways and was on the side of the road. He approached, and about 20 yards away, he suddenly realized it was not a vehicle. A large, hovering, dome-shaped object, estimated 20 feet high, bright white and glowing, rotated slowly in front of his eyes. It was hovering 5 feet off the ground with leaves swirling underneath it. There was no sound, and then the object emitted a bright light, temporarily blinding him. Godfrey then all of a sudden came to, and he was driving back towards the police station that he had just come from, noticing that he had lost about 20 or 30 minutes of time. Along with the general sense of disorientation, he noticed his boot was split open and he had a red itchy mark on his foot. Other police officers that night reported seeing strange glowing objects in the sky, partially collaborating with Godfrey's story here. Once again, ufologists put Godfrey under hypnotic regression, and he encountered under hypnotic regression being taken on board a craft, and he encountered small beings and one tool-like being with an insect-like body. From the hypnotic regression, they got that they were doing some kind of scientific experiments on his body. Godfrey went back to the station, wrote a report, and it was unfortunately leaked to the press, which led to him being ridiculed by both the press and his work colleagues, which led to him leaving the force. Now, for whatever reason, I want to believe Godfrey. I don't automatically discount him. I'm going to give it a C tier again because, like I say, I kind of believe him. The boot being cut open is a weird one, and having a weird mark on his foot, and the fact that he was like ridiculed out of a job, and he never really like made money off it. He didn't write books and things like that. So yeah, I'm gonna put this in C. Next we have the Kera UFO incident, where some kid basically caught a UFO. So on the 25th of August 1972, a 13-year-old Michio Seo was walking home from school when he spotted a strange metallic object. It was hovering and darting around erratically over a rice paddy. He would quickly rally 5 of his friends together, and they took part in hunting down this object, and they tried to catch it. They eventually spotted the object and managed to trap it under an upside-down bucket. When the boys got home, they went and took this photograph, which is what we see here. Over the following days and weeks, the boys reported the object to display strange behavior. It would appear in different places to where they left it. It would escape from under buckets. And one boy was carrying it in a backpack home while riding a bicycle. And then when he got to his friend's house, he took out the backpack, and it was not in there. It was nowhere to be seen. Finally, in September 1972, the final disappearance of the object occurred, where it simply vanished, and it was never to be seen again. The boys maintained their story for decades, and it never changed. But I'm going to put it in D tier, and I'm going to tell you why. There's no other stories I've ever heard of tiny little UFOs like this. And if there was, I don't think some 13-year-old Japanese kids would be able to trap it under a bucket. If like here we've got like the Iranian military and the US military trying to intercept full-sized ones, I don't think some 13-year-old children are going to manage to trap a little nimble one under a bucket. So yeah, I think they made this, and I think they probably made a really cool looking UFO. And they invented this story to, tell it pies. D. I don't think that's controversial. I believe our next sighting is pronounced the Kumburgaz UFO incident, which we have video footage of, which I'm a fan of. Yeah, I think it's pronounced Kumburgaz UFO sightings. Now, these show nighttime video recordings from between 2007 and 2009. And these videos were actually released by the Turkish government here. And the videographer is a Yalcin Yalmaz. And he worked as a night security guard in a residential complex. And he basically filmed these on 23 different occasions using a digital video camera. The video depicts a static disc shape. Sometimes in the videos you see it maneuver, but most of the time it's static for several minutes at a time, flying in the night sky. The videographer Yalman likened the extraterrestrials to being non-hostile, and he viewed them as the world's policeman, was the quote. He saw them as sort of like a guardian of the galaxy, I suppose. Turkish authorities, the National Council for the Study of Science and Technology, have analysed the footage, and they found no signs of tampering or CGI with the footage, no studio manipulation of any sorts. And they also can't put the structure as to being one of their aircrafts, so they've, again, like the Spanish government did, had to put it down as an unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, I think this one's really cool. The fact that we have loads of footage, we literally have like hours worth of footage of this thing. I actually think it's really cool. And I don't believe, a lot of the skeptics will tell you, and the debunkers will say, oh, this is a case of a lens object or reflections from boats and things in the sea reflecting into the sky. I find those disingenuous. I don't believe those. I might put this in S tier, I might put this in S tier because we have real good footage that the Turkish government have looked at and they can't debunk. I don't know. I like the wonder behind it. There seems like a lot of wonder behind this. I like it. I'm putting it in S tier. Am I crazy for doing that? Maybe I should put it in A. Maybe nothing. Does anything deserve S tier? I don't know. Something does. And if something does, that's it. I think that's where I'm setting the S tier bar. Next up, we have the San Carlos de Bariloche incident. On the 31st of July, 1995 in Argentina, a whole town witnessed power outages for around 20 minutes. Professional pilots, air traffic controllers, passengers of planes, ground personnel and civilians living in the town all report these prolonged power outages. Argentina Airlines Flight 674 was coming into Buenos Aires airspace when 150 passengers on board, along with the pilot Jorge Polanco, who had 18 years plus flying experience, noticed a total blackout of power as they were approaching the runway, and obviously all the runway lights went out and they had to pull up on their landing. As the plane circled back around to try another approach on landing, many of the crew and passengers on board noticed a inverted dish-like shaped. It was described by some as two soup bowls joined together. It was approximately 100 feet wide and comparable to a large aircraft, emitting a bright white light and then a green flashing light on the sides. The object approached the plane rapidly, but then would stop abruptly about 100 meters from in front of the plane. The pilot said the saucer would then evade and maneuver behind their aircraft, come from underneath, float up, look at it from the front again, and then accelerate away towards the Andes at a high speed. There was also a secondary naval aircraft in the sky who observed the exact same thing from their position. Multiple ground witnesses reported the craft doing impossible maneuvers and defying the laws of physics. At the time, there was a report by the Argentine Air Force, and they reported this as unexplained. And the head of the Argentinian Air Force at the time came out to the media and said, "Open your minds, for we are not alone." Now, I feel like for some of these other air-based ones, I've ranked them quite lowly, but I feel like giving this one a really high score. The story is quite compelling. The fact that so many people in so many walks of life saw it. We had civilians on the ground. two flights in the sky with passengers on, one of them being Navy, one of them just being a passenger plane. I like that so many different people from different walks of life have seen it. But again, without the visual evidence myself, I think I'm going to give this a B tier. I don't know. I feel like I can't just keep going off the visual, not having visual evidence myself. Do you know what? I'm going to give it A. My gut said A, and I like this case. It sounds very compelling. Next up, we have Russian Roswell, Height 611. So Height 611 took place in January 29th, 1986, and is often referred to as the Russian Roswell. In the small mining town of Dalnorsk, Far East Russia, supposedly a small craft was recovered. Around 8 p.m, many locals saw a glowing red ball or orb about 3 meters in diameter, roughly half the size of the moon from the ground. The object was seen flying parallel very low to the ground before steadying at height 611, the elevation of a nearby rocky hill. Some residents say they saw the object slow and jerk before impacting the hill, while others reported an uncontrollable like rock plunging into the side of the hill. There was no explosion reported or fire, however, there was a large flash and the object embedded itself into the rocky slope. 3 days later, a local scientist went to the hill site where he collected small metallic droplets, black glass-like fragments, and microscopic metal fibers. There was no kind of craft shape recovered or any bodies or anything like that, just scattered fragments all around a small area. Now, around 2 years later, November 1987, it was reported by people in the village that there was some small luminous light objects flying over the crash site, performing small maneuvers, appearing to be searching the crash site. Many have obviously claimed it was perhaps a rescue mission sent. They were obviously 2 years too late. It's often known as the Russian Roswell because there's obviously physical debris evidence in this one. However, a lot of skeptics say that perhaps it was just a meteor or a comet crashing into the hill. That's why they found these strange metallic fragments around the site. And I'd be inclined to thinking maybe that would be so. I think I'm going to put this in the D tier. Coming from Russia as well, it's like, what do we really know? Obviously, they're going to be secretive about everything like that. Next up, we have the Council Bluffs case and some more fragments. On December the 17th in 1977, Council Bluffs, Iowa, we have multiple witnesses seeing an orange light and we have some physical evidence. Residents of the Big Creek Lake Park area reported a big ball of red stuff hovering briefly before it dropped into their local park. When witnesses rushed over, it was described as a glowing orange red mass of molten metal. Some described it as a blob or a boiling puddle. The local fire department arrived and they said the molten rock was still hot to touch for about 2 hours and they had to extinguish the flames on the grass and the area around this molten bit of rock. Samples were taken of the rock and it was high in carbon steel with traces of magnesium, calcium, silicon, and titanium. Now, you might just be thinking, oh, this was a meteor, but witnesses said that they saw the object floating down to the ground quite slowly. It wasn't flying, wasn't hurtling like you would see a meteor. Now, this is a weird one because, okay, say it's come from space. Perhaps it was a UFO. It was part of a ship, part of some debris that came off. Perhaps it was something ejected from a UFO. I don't know, but I'm going to put this one in D just because it's a weird, skeptical story. Perhaps it could have been a hoax. Someone could have made this molten ball and dumped it in the park and set off a flare at the same time to trick some people. I don't know, but not very strong evidence for UFOs for me personally. Next, we have another UFO chase by police officers, the Portage UFO Chase. It's around 5 a.m. Portage County Sheriff Deputies Dale Sparr and Wilbur Neff were on a routine patrol when they stopped to investigate an abandoned car near Route 244. While Sparr was checking out the vehicle, Neff inside the car heard a strange humming sound. Sparr, who was outside the vehicle, turned and saw a large glowing object approaching them from the south. The saucer was described as being ice cream cone shaped, metallic, and about 50 feet in diameter and 20 feet high. It emitted an intense white spotlight that illuminated the ground and bathed the whole area in brightness. It hovered with a slight low hum, initially 100 to 500 feet above them, moving slowly eastward. Spur radioed it in, and the dispatcher told them to stay in pursuit. They jumped in the cruiser and had to keep speeds of 100 miles an hour just to keep up with the cone-shaped object. They crossed into the neighboring county of East Palestine, where officers Wayne Hudson observed it and then joined in the pursuit briefly himself. Then in the next county, Conway, police officer Frank Panzella also joined the pursuit and reported seeing the object himself. The chase would then come to an end when the object rapidly shot up into the sky. The officers were left stunned, and the radio traffic buzzed with reports from multiple jurisdictions reporting they had seen the same thing. This was 1966, so unfortunately no real cell phone footage or even really available video camera footage, and no photos, just the story from these officers to go by. Now, the thing I do like about this is that there was 2 guys involved initially, and then the 2 other deputies in separate cars also had to have the same story, and they did. They had consistent stories across the board. But it's from 66. Stories get told differently. I'm actually going to put this in B tier, I think, because the way that there's literally kind of 3 different parties, 2 of them are together, and two guys are together and then 2 guys individually separately. So 3 parties saw this at different times and reported the same thing, joining in a pursuit. Surely one of them would have been like, what are you chasing? If there's nothing there, but there clearly perhaps was. I think B. Is this a good B tier? It's going to stay in B tier for now. Next up, we have the Coyne Helicopter UFO Encounter. On the 18th of October 1973, near Mansfield, Ohio, a 4-man helicopter crew were traveling back to their base after a training exercise. One of the crew members spotted a red light appearing in the distance, behaving strangely, and it appeared to be on a collision course. The pilot Coyne immediately put the helicopter into descent to avoid impact with the object. But the object would change its course and immediately fly in front of the helicopter, stopping abruptly in front of them. It would hover and watch slightly above the helicopter as the crew got to observe its cigar shape, and it was metallic grey, 60 feet long with a red flashing light on the front. A green beam then emerged from the cigar-shaped vehicle and it swept the cockpit, turning the whole cabin green. There was no heat, no noise, or no turbulence being reported while this green light swept the cockpit. Now, the next part is what makes this case slightly famous. The helicopter then, even though it was set to descend, after being struck with this green beam, it suddenly climbed thousands of feet, going from 1,700 feet to roughly 3,500 feet in just seconds without any pilot input. While this happened, all communications were cut off and the compass was behaving very erratically. The helicopter then stabilized itself and returned to a normal flight path as the cigar-shaped object flew away into the distance, never to be seen again. Again, I think I quite like this one. You see here the drawing of the cigar shape. 4 military personnel on board the aircraft. You know what? I'm going to put this in B, but I'm going to move the last one down to C, I think. I think that's fair. Next, we have ancient UFO cave paintings. Many caves around the world in places like France, Spain, and Africa contain prehistoric art dating back thousands and thousands of years. These arts typically depict bison being hunted by humans with spears. But every now and then, some of these cave paintings features what appears to be a UFO, or, as some of the other descriptions we've had today, cigar-like figures, saucer shapes, So perhaps there is something out there and our ancient ancestors were trying to tell us. We have examples from the Val Camonica petroglyphs in Italy, the Tassil and Aja cave paintings in Algeria, and the Chavet Lasso caves in France. Probably butchered a lot of the pronunciations of those, but you get the idea. I'm actually going to put these in S tier because like, what the hell is this? Like, why does this shape follow on through history for so long? No, let's do A. Let's not do S, because it's a painting in a cave. But we see this cigar-shaped, saucer-shaped figure even back then, and it's the same shape of craft that follows on through history to modern day things like movies now that we have. So it's really interesting, this one. That's why it gets such a good bump. So next up we have the Valensole UFO Close Encounter. So July the 1st, 1965, near Valensole in France, a lavender farmer went out and saw something rather unusual. Again, following our theme here, our lavender farmer went out and saw what he thought was a helicopter, but he saw an egg-shaped, spherical-shaped craft about 3 meters wide. As he approached, he saw 2 1-meter-tall beings with large heads and thin bodies examining the flowers in his field. One of the beings then noticed him, and it pointed a device at him, pressed a button, and it left him paralyzed. He was left conscious, but absolutely paralyzed, stood on the spot. He described it as some immobilization beam. He then said the beings returned to the craft, and it lifted off silently up into the sky, once again, never to be seen again, shooting straight up. Our lavender farmer was immobilized for around 15 minutes until he gained ability of his muscles again. He found himself extremely fatigued and tired and needed to go down and take a nap. The area where the craft landed was completely crushed, and all the lavender plants around the area were dehydrated. The soil where the craft was hard like cement, and the area was actually barren for years after that. Nothing would grow where the craft had been. French authorities took his story with credibility, took him very seriously, and couldn't find any signs of a hoax. Now, I'm not really sure where we're left with this one. It's a very old story, very brief. And even though the authorities said they took the guy seriously, for me, it's just not much to go by. He's a guy on his own. It's easy to make up. I'm putting this in D, I'm afraid. And if he's telling the truth, I feel bad. I'm sorry for that happened to him. But hey, at least he wasn't like abducted and operated on like some of these people are claiming. Next up, we have the old Saybrook incident. So in May 1964, we had another radar and mixed with ground witnesses reports seeing a craft. Residents of Saybrook reported bright, fast-moving lights over the Connecticut coastline. These objects were seen performing sudden stops, sharp turns, and rapid acceleration. Again, movements that would break the law of physics. The US military was scrambled to investigate after initial reports, and the objects were tracked on radar, committing these high movement speeds, and they couldn't work out what they were. So after scrambling jets, unfortunately, the objects would disappear. Little is known about this. There's no like sort of case studies files for them online. So we're kind of going off hearsay. There's not reports of these so much. So I think I have to put them in D tier just because we lack a lot of information on this one. It's just the reports from the local evidence, from the local residents. Sorry. So yeah, I think it's D tier. Next up, we have another Air Force Base, Ellsworth Air Force Base, but this one gets a bit more serious with some nuclear missile silo concerns. So in August 1953, an Ellsworth Air Force Base, it was again at the height of the Cold War and nuclear weapon production, this Air Force Base housed nuclear missiles. The base picked up unidentified targets over the radar, which obviously would have been an extreme concern to have unidentified aircraft flying over a known US nuclear missile site. The objects again were tracked at going extremely high speeds with rapid changes of direction. The US Air Force scrambled jets to see what was going on, and obviously the jets simply couldn't keep up as they watched the UFOs outmaneuver the aircraft and completely avoid any sort of detection by them. It was almost like a sort of cat and mouse game being played, and no one actually got a real close-up look of what these crafts looked like. They were simply described as white or blushing glowing lights in the distance. They would slow, hover, and then accelerate at extreme speeds. And while this was going on, there would be multitude of errors with the nuclear missiles. They would be turned on and turned off and then completely shut down, as if these crafts were simply toying with the US Air Force here. Now, some people say phenomena like this happening is other militaries like flexing their aircraft, but this was the 50s. I definitely don't think anyone would have had anything like that back then. Perhaps they do now, and if they do, perhaps it's backward engineered from another world. But I like this. Again, it's in the Project Blue Book. We have files for this, and the fact that they like shut down nuclear silos, for me, bumps it up to that A tier, where it becomes like really quite interesting. Like, what are they doing? Why do they have all this power? How do they have the ability to do that? They're playing cat and mouse. Like, it's not an accident. Like, some of these they've accidentally been stumbled upon, but when you hear a story like this, that craft, whatever it is, knows what it's doing and is playing some kind of game. And there's records of this in Project Blue Book that have now been declassified. I think it's really quite a compelling one. Next up, we have a mass sighting report, the Farmington UFO Armada. On March the 17th, 1950, in the town of Farmington, thousands of people reported seeing a UFO, but this time in broad daylight, unlike many of these occurrences. The residents of Farmington looked up and saw dozens, if not hundreds, of silver objects flying in the sky. Described as discs or ovals or saucers, they reflected the sunlight. Some people reported over 500 objects flying in the sky in some kind of formation. Again, similarly, like to a lot of the other stories we hear here, they change direction spontaneously, breaking from formation and then constantly regrouping. The movements of crafts, whenever it's described, it's really like erratic and has no kind of structure or shape to it. It seems like completely random. Now, this phenomena was actually pre-Project Blue Book. They hadn't even started Project Blue Book at the time. The Air Force was notified, the military were activated, and they couldn't find any signs of what went on. And there's no known documentation of this event. It's just the local eyewitness reports. And because of this, because it's so old, I think I just have to, I have to put it in one of the bottom tiers. I'm going to put it in D tier because we really don't have anything to go by from a few. There's a lot, do you know what? C, because there was hundreds, if not thousands, of eyewitnesses reporting it in the daytime. But what did they see? Like, it's really hard to imagine what they even would have seen back then. It could have been weather balloons, but then again, the way they would describe moving, perhaps not. But yeah, it's really hard to break something like this old down. Nearly 70. Well, it's 75 plus years old, nearly 75 plus years old. Next up, we go back to France with the Trans-en-Provence Case. A local resident, Renato Nicolai, was in his garden when he heard a strange humming sound. He reported a disc-shaped object, 2.5 meters in diameter with a circular base and a rim-like structure. As he spotted it, it descended quickly, landed in his garden for a split second, and then took off and flew into the distance again. This whole event lasted just a few seconds. Similar to the circle pit we had on the ground earlier, when the UFO landed, it left a circular mark on the ground, and the soil was really compressed and also chemically altered when tested. Plants in his garden showed a lot of biological damage and showed traces of chlorophyll. Interestingly, when scientists looked further, they found damage of microwave radiation in the plants around, and also that the soil was so compressed that it must have been compressed by some kind of mechanical machinery or a really heavy object. And it was also had been heated. The area of the landing site was really, really hot, and some of the plants were singed. Nikolai was found to be reliable and consistent, and there was absolutely no reason for him to lie or tell the story. He never tried to write a book. He never tried to profit off this. His story matched much of the scientific evidence on the site. Now, this picture we're using here wasn't actually, unfortunately, a picture that he captured. If it was, it would probably be going in the S tier. But I do like this piece of evidence. I'm going to go ahead and bang it straight in the B tier because the chemical element in this one is a lot more convincing than the other circular ground formation that we had. I don't know, maybe it's because it was a bit later on. It was in the 80s, this was. So the scientific tests might have been better. But the fact that the plants had like radiation damage, the ground had been singed and it was hot, and they determined it must have had some like heavy machinery on it. And And they found the guy to be really consistent and like really unlikely to hoax. He didn't like gain anything from this. I like it. I like it. Like it's scientific, right? Chemical evidence. Beta. Next, we have the Michigan swamp gas case, where hundreds of residents of a town, along with pilots and police officers, all reported seeing strange lights in the sky. They reported discs that hovered, darted rapidly, and changed colours in the night sky. This was in a small town just off Lake Michigan in 1966. The story would explode locally in local newspapers, and astronomer from the local university, Alan Hynek, became directly involved and collaborated with the US Air Force in their investigations. This case is known as the swamp gas case because the local astronomer from the University of Michigan explained that the sightings were likely due to swamp gas. Ignited swamp gas in the area, marsh methane, can produce glowing lights, especially at night, that he believes were the cause for many people seeing UFOs throughout the night. Now, his explanation has been heavily criticized by many. The fact that hundreds of people saw these lights, many people are so sure of what they saw, it can't have been gases in the sky. Perhaps the Air Force were onto him and told him, you have to put out this perhaps false explanation. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in the D tier, because I'm going to trust this local astronomer. It's totally reasonable that swamp gas could cause lights in the sky. And if you saw some crazy lights in the sky, you might want to report it as a UFO, especially if your neighbors are doing the same thing. So yeah, I just think this is in here as well as a reminder that perfectly, completely natural, normal phenomena can seem extraterrestrial when really it's just some gases lighting up in the sky. Next, we have the Petrozavodsk Phenomenon. Hope I'm not butchering that pronunciation. We're back to Russia and also nearby Finland, where we have thousands of residents reporting lights in the sky. On September the 20th, 1977, thousands of people reported a star-like or jellyfish-shaped light coming from the night sky. It was a light that was emitting rays or like tentacle beams. It hovered in the sky and moved slowly before completely disappearing. And we do actually have a photo of this one, and it is a pretty cool photo. Witnesses said the object also had no sound, which obviously adds to the mystery here. Also in the area, meteorological stations reported unusual signs of upper atmosphere activity, and Soviet scientists had to begin investigating amidst an unprecedented scale of reports. But the object only lasted in the skies for about 10 to 15 minutes, and it was really quite too late to investigate anything before anyone could act. Now, it's a pretty cool photo that is created, nonetheless, but I've seen this explained as in the sun setting sky as a rocket takeoff. The jet fuel from rocket takeoffs can create a weird effect in the sky at certain sunrises and sunsets. This was at sunset. So I'm going to put this in the C tier. I don't know. Again, it's not good evidence for me because, like, what even is this? It's a cool looking photo. I'll give you that. But there was a rocket that was launched at the same time as these sightings. And I think knowing that, it bumps it back down to a D for me. It's probably some weird reflections from rocket fuel from a space launch. And last but not least, we have the Kaikoura Lights in New Zealand. On New Year's Eve, December the 31st, 1978, near Kaikoura on the South Island of New Zealand, we had local residents, police officers and airport personnel reporting bright lights moving in unusual patterns right as it struck midnight. People described multiple bright lights appearing in formation, lights hovering in place, sometimes moving rapidly in a zigzag formation. Again, everything we've heard before, which is something to like, I think it goes one of two ways, right? It's either people that report UFOs are really into it and want to set up a hoax story. So they already know all the lore. They already know that it moves in zigzag patterns and it moves erratically. But also if it's real and you don't know much about it, you were to see it and say, oh, it moved erratically in a zigzagging pattern. It's like, okay, that's consistent with other people's stories. So just, I don't know, keep that in mind. Take that how you will. But these lights in New Zealand, it was said they changed from white to red to yellow. Now, I do want to point out here, this was New Year's Eve as it struck midnight. What do people tend to do on New Year's Eve as it strikes midnight? But anyway, let me continue with the case. Now, there is actually footage of this, and you can see it's kind of weird. It does look like weird footage. And also radar from the local airport did report high-speed accelerations on their radar systems. Now, maybe being at the strike of midnight on New Year's Eve was to blend in. Maybe the aliens were like, oh, we can blend in as fireworks if we just fly around at this time. But I think if you watch the video, it's not fireworks. It looks weird. Whatever it is weird. Again, we had a lot of witnesses. We have it on radar. We have actual video this time. I think I have to give this B. I think it'd be rude if I gave it any less. But for some reason, I'm like not convinced by this. That's why it can only stay as a B. I don't know. Just feels weird to me. But even when you watch the video, it looks weird. It's like, okay, that's something weird going on there. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with where we've ended up there. I feel like a tier list is meant to be kind of structured like this. I didn't know where everything was going to end up before I started here. So I think this is fair. Let me know where you would have placed anything. Let me know if I got anything wrong here. I'd love to know. And remember, like and subscribe. I hate to say it, but it does help me out. So yeah, thanks. See you next video.